I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Emmy nominee Matthew Goode, who stars alongside Sir Anthony Hopkins in Freud's Last Session. First things first, Matthew, I really need to go straight to Sir Anthony, because for me, he's one of the
Fair
greatest
enough.
of all time. Come on, man.
Yeah.
What impression did working with him leave on you, both personally and creatively?
Well, I mean, Tony, I couldn't call him Anthony because that's the first thing he said. You call me Tony. And I was like, yeah, of course. And he's been a hero of mine for forever. I think he's a cinematic icon, and I'm just completely in love with him. And he has sort of become a bit of a friend and a mentor since we've worked together. But I guess I was quite scared, not only of working with him, but also working with a man who'd already played C.S. Lewis in a film that I already loved, in Shadowlands. So it was the kind of this, it's like a double jeopardy for me. But he was just, I walked in and he was so generous and so kind. And actually we barely spoke about Lewis. I think probably because in the back of his mind, he's thinking he might have given me he might have given me the willies if he brought up some information about Lewis that I didn't know or whatever. But he's so generous, and it's just a wonder to behold a man who is, I mean, he's not a spring chicken, but but he's in his, he's of a certain age, and but you wouldn't know it because he's full of beans and full of energy, and we were knocking out. I had him to myself for 4 weeks, just me and him, or 3 weeks actually. So we knocked out half of the film in just over 3 weeks, and long pages, a lot of like 7 or 8 pages a day, which is quite a lot. And I'm full of admiration, and it was a joy to watch him do his Freud. I mean, there's some moments that are terribly moving in it.
Yeah.
But he also brought a lot of levity to it that I wasn't necessarily expecting as well. So it's like, okay. So it's fun.
It's so entertaining just to watch the two of you spar with each other on this age-old debate between spirituality and science. I'm curious.
Well, sparring, he just kind of kicks my ass. but that's why I quite like screenplays, because I think because it's kind of like this meeting probably didn't happen, but there's an element of sensitivity towards that you could have had an almighty ding-dong intellectual battle where they're screaming at each other and everything else. But if you do the research, that's not the kind of men they were. So there is, and certainly not Lewis, it was very compassionate and, calm. And so, yeah, which is great because it meant that I hope that there was quite a lot of subtlety to the way that we approached some of those scenes, and a lot of internalization of some things, because effectively, I mean, Lewis would have known his theories on many things, because he was also, we're talking about two of the greatest minds of the 20th century. So he would have known that anything he's asked about with his child there's going to be a repercussion in the room, or he's going to see something and Freud's going to be like, okay, that's interesting. So anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I just love this conceit. I love this idea of having the two of them come together with all the stuff going around them outside. I was really taken with your portrayal of C.S. Lewis. I love how you portrayed him as stoically resolute, but there's a lot of that vulnerability that is bubbling underneath, that as we learn more about his past, particularly his PTSD. Did you find it difficult to work out how you were going to calibrate that, or did it come relatively easily for you?
I don't find anything comes terribly easy. Well, some days it does, I don't know. But I was gifted a lot of time for research, which was wonderful. And there's a lot to unpick. I mean, thankfully, actually, I mean, that he'd only written, because he wrote 30 books, I mean, and they're dense. So Pilgrim's Regress is not for the faint-hearted, let me tell you. It's an extraordinary allegory, but not everything else, but it's dense. I think I got a dictionary out on a few occasions because there were a few words I'm like, I don't know what that word means. But I found the most, so there's several, like 2 things that I found very, very good. Once you've read a few of the books and you've got a mind, some of his Christian, and because he was a Christian apologist, so he spoke in defense of that, and that was a lot of his work was. But in 1955, he wrote a book called Surprised by Joy, which is kind of like a memoir of his earlier years. And so it goes into, and it unpicks the kind of the trauma. I mean, he talked about his school days being more traumatic than World War I and serving in the trenches, which is which shows you, I mean, obviously his mother had just died, and his father was a very distant sort of Victorian style father. You know, would have been brutal on him, and he was also away from Warney, who was his brother, who was at a different school. So it was like, oh my lord, I mean, it would have been awful. So yeah, and we're shaped. Most of us are shaped by what's happened in our childhood. So yeah, they did want to bring a. I mean, you can't demonstrate it because that's not what good acting is about. Well, it shouldn't be unless you're doing panto.
It's not,
but
it's not.
Yeah, I guess sort of that thing is that if you do a lot of research and you learn as much as you can, then throw it all away so you can play. And then if you've done that, you know, it should come out in the way that you want it to. So I wasn't necessarily meaning, well, this is a perfect time for me to look a bit upset and vulnerable, but it comes out through the things, and it comes out through the acting communication from the God that I have opposite me. That's sort of, we take each other with that. It was a really, and this is going to sound really stupid, but it was a real exercise, because especially because there's long periods where I'm being talked at. It was a real exercise of listening and responding, which I know sounds stupid, but yeah, there were definite moments where I was like, I would go to Brownie, I'm like, mate, am I giving enough? Am I, you know? He's like, and luckily he was like, yeah, it's great, but yeah.
It's interesting because Matt Brown was telling me that one of the things he most valued about having you there on set and being part of this is the way that you're able to listen. And
good. Okay.
Yeah, so you get a tick from the director. No, but seriously, I think it's something that I've noticed about a lot of your work, actually. You're not the kind of actor who goes like really over the top, but there's a lot going on, maybe apart from Robert Evans a little bit in The Offer, but that was a good thing. That's what we wanted to see. I'm curious though, that when you get a script like this, do you ever have to be interested in the topic or the subject, like this debate between science and religion? Is it something that interests you that made you compelled to kind of dive deep in it, or do you separate yourself from that?
I think, well, I mean, it's always, I mean, it depends how much you need to check. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, and I don't mean to be crass, but if the family needs feeding and there's a story that you can be involved in, great. But if it happens to be a fascinating topic, which this is, then double joy. And if you get Tony as well, it's Shangri-La. So, sorry. So the question is, did I have an? I mean, it's not something that I wander around, thinking about in my day-to-day life. However, the minute that the screenplay, and I thought it was because it was obviously originally a play, and so that first part of it, you kind of go, oh, okay, and then you read the screenplay and you're like, okay, are we going to be slightly in danger of it? You know, how are you going to make it cinematic? Because it still feels a little bit like a play. And there were flashbacks, so you know, okay, that we probably are going to want to escape from the room occasionally. And I thought Matt did that really well. But yeah, I find it endlessly fascinating. And I think great men need to sit down in rooms more and find out what they've got in common rather than what they don't have in common. I think that I'm not going to be crass and talk about what's going on in the Middle East right now, but it seems to me that we need diplomacy and incredible statesmen and the greatest minds in the world in charge of our countries. But however, let's get back to this. But they actually, when you think about it, regardless of whether you believe in God, and C.S. Lewis was, as I say, a Christian apologist, and apologist comes from the Greek of apologia, which means to speak in defense of, right? Mm-hmm. And so to break it down into an absolute nutshell, he came up with like a trilemma, which is like, if you look at what everything God was saying, there's only three options. One is that he was mad, one is that he was bad, and one is that he was God. And when you think about it, you kind of go, well, he doesn't seem mad, he seems very coherent, he's very lucid. I mean, some of the stuff he says, even Lewis said he sounds like a bit of a poached egg, which is a direct quote. But he doesn't seem deceitful. He's not making loads of money out of it. So he was like, after all of his analysis, he was like, seems like there's a pretty good possibility that he might have been God, or certainly the son of God. And obviously that doesn't work for Freud. So it's and ultimately, if you think about the kind of what they really had in common and what the Bible has in common with it, it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not, but the scriptures kind of pointing, we need to tell our truth. It will set us free and we will be better people, particularly if you're nice to your neighbor and everything else. And actually modern psychology is pointing sort of in exactly the same way. if you can get to your sort of true self and pay everything back, and then the world will be a better place. And that's kind of where they kind of cross over. And that's what's great. That's what's kind of, we don't really get there in our film, but that's what I've been thinking about ever since I've done it. And it just prompts me towards, if people don't talk, you end up fighting. So we need to keep talking.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I took away from it. One of the things I took away. Absolutely. And it doesn't take a side, which was interesting, because I probably would have had, my inclination would have been to take a side. But no, that's not the whole point of this. And it's
yeah, I think by the end of it, and that's what I love about Tony's performance, because and there's why all this sensitivity from Lewis is because he's sitting there and he's a smart guy. He comes in, you can see that this guy is slightly off kilter. He's of a certain age, there's like, and then I would imagine he's twigged. I played that he twigged that he was seriously ill before he was told that he had exactly what he had. And actually, Freud, it would have been in the papers, but Freud had, I think, before he kills himself at the end of commits suicide 2 weeks after the end of this film, effectively 2 or 3 weeks. But he'd had 33 operations on his mouth, and the man must have been in agony, in incredible pain. So I don't know if actually that's kind of interesting, whether Lewis would have known, not to the extent, but would have known about that, or whether it was kept private. Maybe it was. That's probably a question I should have asked before I did it.
Let's rewind. Yeah, no, but you're right.
Yeah. But I can't forget. I forgot what my point was going to be now. And see, this is what happens. This is why I'm awful. This is why I'm a terrible interviewer. I lose my train of thought so easily.
But,
like a golden
there's so much to unpack, mate. There's so much to unpack in this. In fact, my original question about the scene, which really got me when the men have been forced to flee because of that false alarm bomb raid. Because Matt Brown told me that about how the original location was cancelled, that was something else, and you guys had to really pull out all stops. But I really, really loved the way that scene panned out. Like, what about you? What did you think of it?
Well, I had a bit of, I'll tell you the truth, right? So it was so beautifully described in the script. It's like, okay, he goes in, and then they start walking down into the crypt. And I was like, oh, that's cool, because, just the image of that is great, and it will be dark. Maybe if I can't bring the emotion, I can just smack my head on the wall. Those are the kind of things that I think about occasionally. I'm like, what happens if I can't get there? I'm always worried. And then I turn up, and I was like, Matt, where's this crypt? The gates of hell, as it's described in the script. And he's like, yes, we've had to pivot. Matthew. I'm really sorry about that, but unfortunately, it was really steep where we were going to film this, and we were worried that Tony, anybody could really hurt themselves down there. I was like, okay, right, okay, fine. So where are we going to shoot? Where are we going to shoot it? And he takes me to the back of the church, and then I was like, and he's like, don't worry, there's going to be a flashing light, and I'm like, it's in a corridor. We're in a corridor where seemingly children hang their coats for play school. This is it. And he's like, yeah. He's like, but I can see you're having a wobble. Fix up. We got to do it. We haven't got an option. I was like, okay, fair enough. I'm a little disappointed, but
yeah.
And it was good. And then you just get on with it, for goodness sake. And we only had a couple of whacks at it, and I think Matt was like, because we had to move on really quickly, and I think Matt was like, we might be revisiting this. I'm not sure we got it. And then luckily he got home, and the editor was thrilled. So thank God. Yeah.
You would never have known, because of the smoke and mirrors of filmmaking, that
smoke and mirrors, mate. Smoke and mirrors.
Mirrors, because I reckon you really went for it, and it's really, really effective, because it's the first time where I'm like, oh, hang on, yes, of course, C.S. Lewis is dealing with a lot of stuff, and here we are.
I think what I like as well, that's kind of you, thank you, Rob. I think what's also quite nice, and I was a bit worried about, and then thought, was the fact that we're going to show a flashback, but like 45 minutes afterwards.
Yeah.
I was like, people are going to be like, I guess I was thinking, well, maybe people will be sitting there going, what was that about? Well, something's up with him or whatever. But I think it clears itself up pretty quickly. I mean, Freud talks about stuff. So, but wasn't Rhys Mannion Yeah, we've got to give Rhys Mannion a little bit of love because he played. I did before we started shooting. I said to Matt, I said, "Listen, Matt, darling man, I can't play 18 anymore. So, I mean, we've got. I mean, we really do have to get to get someone else because there was Jack. Do you think you'd be able to do that?" I'm like, "No, I'm 45." And Rhys Mannion, you know, he came in and he had to do that scene. I thought he was really wonderful, really wonderful. And also he's very Irish, so he does pretty good English, doesn't he?
He does.
But we've got to
give
love. That's what I would say.
Excellent casting. I totally agree.
I bought it for sure. I thought he was great.
I'm not suggesting that you can't play a younger man. Like they could have, you know, I don't know what they
have to do something like the Scorsese thing. They
correct.
Did
it was only budget because it's not because of your abilities. It's just the budget. So they'd rather just pay Rhys to do it. And that's fine.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything about this story. I hadn't ever seen the play or read the script. I just went in cold, and I was like, "Oh, okay, Freud and Lewis met, cool." And then I'm like, "No, they didn't actually meet. This is all just a conceit, which is fascinating." So,
yeah, it came from the fact that there was a visitor's book at Freud's, and it said Oxford Don, and so someone was like, "Why not? Why not write that?" I mean, how fascinating to get two of the great minds of the 20th century in a room. And it's not going to be it for everybody, this kind of film, but it's kind of rare to get like a sort of a film that deals with these kind of topics and that doesn't have loads of special effects and that kind of thing. Nothing wrong with those kind of films, but like for us, it was kind of like, oh, I haven't done a play in ages, and it felt like, doing a play on it was. I mean, it was really wonderful to have because there's gear changes in it and the paces, but it's quite nice to have very two men not giving too much away, figuring each other out, like duking it out in a very professorial kind of way,
Yeah, like gentlemen, but then it starts getting a little bit excitable.
Yeah.
I just love that. My final question is, I'm hoping that you can remember back during production, those 3 weeks of filming, did you have a particular moment that you wanted to share about your time on set with the crew and with Sir Anthony, and something that you'll always remember?
I mean, we did have some cracking moments, and it was quite a light crew, very, very deeply respectful. I mean, that's the great thing. If I walk into a room, it's like, "Oh, mate." When Tony walks into the room, there's reverence, and, because he's a Don, man. So, but I mean, I suppose one of the things that I will always remember was actually how we began. So you walk in, I've spoken to Tony on the phone, and this is quite. I mean, he phoned up, he cold called me, right? So I was like, "Oh, it's probably one of my agents. I don't know, it's an American number." I was like, "Hello, hello there, it's Tony." I'm like, "Oh my god, I forgot." And then obviously I waved my wife into the room, put it on, and we chatted for like 45 minutes. And I kept getting my wife going, "Let him speak." And I was like, "Sorry, I'm just excited." But when we got, so I hadn't met him in the flesh until day one, and I saw him briefly in makeup, and he was wonderful. We get on set, and everyone's a bit nervous around him, and he just goes, "I'm going to make a little speech. Hello, everyone. I'm Tony. I was first here on the stage 55 years ago." And you're like, "Oh my God, what did he do?" And he goes, "It was a small film." You're like, "Oh yeah, The Lion of Winter with Peter O'Toole," and a small film with Peter O'Toole and Catherine Hepburn. And you're like, "Oh," and it was on this stage, and you're like, "And it's great to be back. Come on, let's rehearse." And he was like, "Okay," but you're like, "Wow, Hepburn and O'Toole, the man's seen it all." He talked about a few things about me and Peter. Because this is back when he might have a jar or two. He's like, "Yeah, me and O'Toole go to the bar, and we'd fight. And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, and we go back to work." I was like, "What are you doing in the middle of the day?" That's amazing. I mean, he hasn't drunk for 40 years, but his stories are just, they make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, because he's one of the last links to Olivier and the original cast that he set up. We've just lost Michael Gambon this year. And I'm pretty sure that Tony will live to 186. He's probably got another 100 years in him, and 78 films and 10 more series, or whatever he's going to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. I remember.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I'm just talking drivel. But
I just love that story, and it makes me think maybe that the C.S. Lewis link between you, maybe in a little while you might play Sir Anthony in a biopic. So let's hope for the best, right? You should do a pretty.
No, but do you know who would be very good? It would be Matthew Rhys. I think give a Welshman a job.
Okay, give a Welshman a
Rhys
job.
a pal, so let's throw Rhys a great big fat T-bone of a part.
Let's.
Yeah.
And then you could maybe still work together. You could have the.
Maybe I can do O'Toole, and we can
fight
on screen. But that actually would be quite fun.
You know what? I think there's a little kernel of something here that you might want to option. And, you know, you and Matthew Rhys drinking wine is one of my favorite things to see on my TV. So I think
get in. Yes.
We wouldn't
do that kind of thing.
No, of course not. On that note, Matthew, thank you so much for your time today. Congrats on
thank you. Thank you for having me. Okay, have a lovely day.